this devolution isn't just words; it's real direction of travel. So I think the business community, is a bit like 2024. We are hopeful that there is some real change on the horizon. But as with 24, unfortunately, that hope was dashed in the budget. And I think this budget coming up in October is really super critical for the business community.
Andy Burnham is touring the country this week talking about the cost of living. But would his time be better spent doing some outreach to the business community? The Times is reporting this morning that Burnham is struggling to convince one of his closest allies, Jim O'Neill, to join his government because of concerns about a potential wealth tax by that very government. So does he have a problem working with business productively? Let's talk to Steve Rigby, co-chief executive of the Rigby Group, a huge UK business. Steve joins us now. Morning to you, Steve.
Morning, Stig.
You've written in the paper as well today. Is running the country like running a business, do you think?
I think the complexities, Stig, of running the country are substantially greater than running a business. I wouldn't kid ourselves, it's like running a collection of businesses by each department. So I think the reality is there are some similarities in leadership, there are some similarities in strategy, in setting out a vision, in taking people with you. But the intricacies, the day-to-day, do differ quite substantially.
I've been around businesses where it's very easy for CEOs to tinker around the edges, but something fundamental that shifts the focus of a business is very costly, it's very painful, and therefore it's often not done or not even tried. That's presumably a similarity here. We're seeing Burnham can do things around the edges, but can he fundamentally change the course of the British economy seems to be a legitimate question.
I think any successful business, Stig, at the heart of it is an amazing leader, and he or she that leads that business, they can run through walls if they set the right vision. The same could be true for this government, and there's no doubt, I think we've all been impressed by the first 3 weeks or so of this government. They seem to be making a difference. I know, talking to some of the mayors in the combined authorities, this devolution isn't just words; it's real direction of travel. So I think the business community, is a bit like 2024. We are hopeful that there is some real change on the horizon. But as with 24, unfortunately, that hope was dashed in the budget. And I think this budget coming up in October is really super critical for the business community.
The argument there's an argument in the paper today that Jim O'Neill might not be able to join in because he wants to have Andrew Burnham wants a wealth tax. Is it true that any government that wants a wealth tax might struggle to work with business leaders who tend to be wealthy, who tend to think that income creation is an important part of being a business leader, and keeping some of that income is important as well?
Stig, we have an incredibly progressive tax system in the UK, which I fully support. So 1% of the population pay 27% of the tax bill. The top 10%, 60%. So we have a progressive tax system. If that cohort needs to pay more, let's make it more progressive. Bringing in taxes on illiquid assets that have already been taxed to be spent by a government where, frankly, I'm not sure everybody would think that there is effective use of that tax to be deployed if we're going to tax illiquid assets, which are notoriously difficult to value. It has I have no doubt in my mind. The Wealth Tax Commission advised to focus on 22,000 people on a wealth tax, which would raise about 12 billion. But those 22,000 people are highly mobile people. They're probably, above 50, children no longer at home. And now the global landscape on where one can live from a wealth perspective is very different than it was even 10 years ago. So I would urge extreme caution. We've seen countries like Norway try this recently. Mass exodus of their most important wealth creators and taxpayers. So I would personally urge extreme caution.
Would you urge him to try and, you mentioned that 24, the arrival of the Labour government and then they disappointed businesses. I don't think he's going to do this, but would he impress you if he said the biggest mistake Labour made was actually increasing the employer contribution to national insurance? We're going to row that back. Would that be something would that be an ask from you?
What the reality, Stig, is we had in the very latter stage of the Conservative government in the January and the April before they lost control, we had reductions in employee national insurance. They totaled about 19 billion, and the employer national insurance rises were about 22 billion. So all we saw was a reversal, frankly, of a policy from the Conservatives through into Labour, but the math broadly stayed the same. So we're in this position where that hole existed in the public finances. It was filled. I don't think it was the correct place to go, but I'm also a realist to say right now the likelihood of that being changed is extremely low.
We were talking earlier about this. I'm interested in your thoughts on this question, Steve. Is the biggest challenge facing business the cost of energy? I wonder if we talk a lot around this in a variety of different ways, and we don't have a very big manufacturing base anyway, but if AI is the future and data centres and all of that, we have a cripplingly high energy costs. We have a grid that doesn't really function and is not very connective, and that's causing us a problem when it comes to renewables being brought online. Is that almost the first thing the government should fix? Can we get cheap energy into this country as a way of driving, fundamentally changing the pathway and the speed of the economy?
We've got this sort of new infrastructure class, Stig, digital infrastructure, so data centres, compute, that will drive much of the intelligence in the world moving forward. And in reality, because the cost of the compute itself is so high, the electrical component of that, the watts, actually aren't the most important thing here in the UK. It's availability of power and its delivery of data centres in a timely manner that are the top priority. I think in manufacturing, the cost of power is a material issue, but I'm a realist. I don't see a way forward. If we look at the way in which our power is charged in this country, about 19% relates to structural historical decisions on environmental decisions and on policy decisions. And unless we can put those on the balance sheet of the country, which is highly unlikely, I don't see, Stig, how we're going to change the electricity price until we get through this energy transition, which realistically is a generation's worth of work ahead. And I'm pleased to see the new Energy Secretary talking about slowing some of that down, especially if it's going to impact the pockets of consumers.
But we're not. If we have 10 years of not being able to be very successful with our energy, we might well be behind the revolution in AI that's happening.
Yeah, Stig, reasonably close to the AI world. Really pleased that the new AI minister's on board. And, as a technology business, I talk very closely with most of the large technology businesses here in the UK. We're all on the same page. We don't think the cost of power is the inhibitor for a digital transformation of the UK. We're a service-led industry in the UK. We've got, many positive things going for us in terms of our opportunity to grasp AI here, and not least in London with our amazing professional service community. So we believe that the critical issue is the availability of power and data centre space, rather than necessarily just that cost of energy, which probably makes up about 4 or 5% of a cost increase in the UK of delivering compute compared to, say, the US. It's a factor, but it's not the biggest factor because we're all beholden to NVIDIA chips and other components, which fundamentally make up the majority of that price.
Interesting. Steve, really good to speak to us ever. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
That's Steve Rigby, their co-chief executive of the Rigby Group.